Billionaire's bride publicly humiliates his maid, unaware she's the groom's mother. She is the mother of your husband. My mother passed away many years ago. You know, they say that life has a funny way of coming full circle, but humorous isn't really the word you use when you're going through the worst of that circle. When you're 58 years old and cleaning floors to maintain your roof over your head. Perhaps cruel, definitely heartbreaking. Funny, though. No, sweetheart. What I experienced in that Charlotte, North Carolina home was not amusing. I'm Delilah Washington, and I must share a story with you that will most likely bring you to tears. Keep reading because, well, this narrative concludes in a way that no one saw coming. Lord knows I've shed enough tears over it myself. Not even myself. Before continuing, I want to invite you to like the video and leave a comment from where you are watching this beautiful story. I wasn't always a maid, you see. After 28 years of teaching third grade at Roosevelt Elementary, I stood with pride in front of classrooms full of kids. Down the hall, my husband, Clarence, may he rest in peace, was a high school math teacher. Baby, we were teachers. We supported the development of young brains and the idea that every child should have the opportunity to dream beyond their current situation. However, life, you are often put to the test in ways you never imagined in life. For years, Clarence and I attempted to conceive our own children. It might not happen for you after years of praying, hoping, and seeing doctors who used medical jargon. Oh, how our hearts rejoiced when I became pregnant with twins at the age of 28. Jeremiah and Jasmine are two adorable babies, a boy and a girl. I still recall their gorgeous little faces sleeping peacefully, their tiny fingers encircling mine. When it occurred, they were just 2 years old. I keep thinking about that day and what I could have done differently. Eastland Mall was where we were. It was like that back then, you know. While parents shopped and chatted with neighbors, families would spend entire Saturdays there, letting the children play. While Clarence was examining church ties, I observed the infants playing in the former children's play area. They were giggling while climbing on those foam animals 1 minute. The next minute was gone, simply gone, as if they had simply disappeared. According to the cops, everything appeared professional. Inexplicably, security cameras stopped working. Witnesses were unable to provide precise descriptions. In broad daylight, 2 infants were taken from their mother, and no one noticed. Officer Riley, a good-hearted woman, was the detective assigned to our case. She spent months or possibly years working on that case. However, the frequency of the calls decreased over time. Her voice lost its hope. Resources were reallocated to more recent cases and leads. I never stopped looking, and neither did Clarence. We hired private investigators with every available dollar, anything that could bring our babies home, including reward money. Our home was mortgaged twice. We pursued every lead, no matter how minor, and drove to every city. We looked for 28 years. 28 years of shattered expectations. What if scenarios, and maybe this time. You know what, though, kept us going? The kids of those other people. It reminded me why I became a teacher in the first place every day when I walked into that classroom and saw those happy faces staring up at me. Someone had to have faith in these infants, someone who saw their potential when others might not have. I recalled Tavian, a young child who wore the same shirt 3 days in a row and had holes in his shoes when he went to school. To keep the lights on, his mother had to work 2 jobs. I therefore began to maintain a box of clothing in my classroom. Simple, clean items that I would get at clearance sales or thrift stores. I had fresh shoes ready for Tavian when his shoes finally broke apart entirely. They are size 6 and have tiny automobiles on them. You ought to have seen the joy on his face. And Amara, adorable little Amara, who was too proud to beg for assistance even though she never had lunch money. Telling her that I'd cooked too many sandwiches and couldn't waste excellent food, I began packing extras. As if it were the most natural thing in the world, she would eat the sandwich with a smile, and I would see the gratitude in her eyes as she ate every crumb. I donated every cash I had to the kids. For those whose backpacks are torn, new ones are provided. Notebooks and pencils for children whose parents were unable to purchase materials. The newborns that arrived shivering in November needed winter clothes. Clarence used to make fun of me by claiming that because I was constantly going to the dollar store to get school supplies, I was the only one keeping it open. He used to say, "You can't save them all," as he watched me go through tiny packages of crayons and glue sticks. I had to try, though. You don't get it? After losing my own children, those kids became my mission. My heart would hurt and hurt every time I saw a little lady with Jasmine's radiant smile or a young boy with Jeremiah's inquisitive gaze. Perhaps I could ease someone else's child's burden, but I couldn't save my own. For years, even decades, this continued. Clarence and I gave those classrooms and those kids in need our hearts and our paychecks. We led a simple life. We had hand-me-down furniture, a little house, and outdated automobiles, but we were content, you know. We had our mission and each other, and we continued to hope that one day our babies would return home. Clarence then became ill. In the beginning, it was just a persistent cough. He attributed some of his exhaustion on marking too many papers late at night, but we realized something was seriously off when his cough turned bloody and his exhaustion got so extreme that he could hardly stand in front of his classroom. Lung cancer. Phase 3. We were struck by the words like a freight train. All of a sudden, my robust, intelligent husband, the one who could solve any mathematical puzzle and inspire a genuine interest in algebra in teenage students, was as delicate as tissue paper in a hospital bed. The therapy was forceful. He endured radiation that scorched his skin, chemotherapy that made him ill for days, and surgery that removed a portion of his lung but, fortunately, removed the majority of the tumor. Clarence battled like a fighter through it all. He made a joke about how cancer had chosen the wrong math teacher to play with, and that he would figure out how to defeat it down to the very last cell. Thank God, his insurance paid for the most of the treatment. However, when it comes to cancer treatment, the remaining portion can be crippling. Co-pays, uninsured prescription drugs, specialized equipment we required for our homes. Time away from work for appointments and recuperation, all of these quickly accumulated. I began taking up summer school programs, working extra hours, and tutoring children after school. Clarence took money out of his retirement account. We purchased an older vehicle after selling ours. Despite cutting every possible budget, the cash and bills continued to come in, and I continued to spend money on my kids. It may sound ridiculous, but I was unable to stop. How could I not get young Brisson a winter coat when I saw her attending school without one in December? How could I not give her mother some groceries and act like it was a loan I never expected to be repaid when Nalani's family lost their apartment and she was living out of a car? Clarence comprehended. He understood, even though he was sick. When he saw me smuggling school supplies into my bag, he would say, "Delilah, those babies need you because of what is happening to me. Don't you dare to stop being who you are." But we were both dying from stress, the stress of fighting a battle we weren't sure we could win, the financial strain, and the worry that we might lose him. Everything has a cost. I was praying fervently, teaching all day, taking care of Clarence at night, and trying to care for my students while keeping an eye on every dime. Clarence endured 3 long, difficult years of treatment, hope, setbacks, and minor victories. There were moments when I was ready to say goodbye, moments when his numbers improved and the doctor's expression brightened a bit, and moments when it seemed like he might beat it. Ultimately, Dad died quietly on a spring Tuesday morning while holding my hand and gazing out the window at our backyard's dogwood tree, which was just beginning to bloom. He mentioned the kids in his final remarks. He forced me to swear that I would continue to take care of them and stand up for them when no one else would. I was 56 years old, and for the first time since I was 18, I was living alone. Our retirement funds, savings, and everything we had earned for over the course of our 30 years of marriage had all been consumed by the medical expenditures. The home we had purchased as newlyweds was heavily mortgaged. Although it was helpful, Clarence's pension was insufficient to cover everything. I continued to teach, nevertheless. Was there anything else I could do? To be honest, I needed those kids just as much as they needed me. In the sea of sorrow I was drowning in, they were my lifeline. Although the financial situation was becoming dire, seeing their expressions every morning as I entered the classroom served me a reminder that life goes on and that there is still worthwhile work to be done in the world. You are aware of the pay scale for teachers. We don't pursue education in order to become wealthy. I had around $200 a month left over after paying the mortgage, electricity, and remote medical costs, and I was still spending half of that on my pupils. I was powerless to stop myself. I purchased Zion's school supplies when his grandmother was unable to pay for them. I went shopping with Kendra when she needed new shoes because hers had holes in them that were completely worn through. I discreetly paid the $15 cost for the third-grade class's field trip to the Science Museum while pretending it was an anonymous donation to the teacher because 5 of the students couldn't afford it. Mrs. Anderson, my principal, began to take notice. She would witness me staying up late, planning supply drives and using my own funds to purchase incentives and decorations for the classroom. She drew me aside one day. She replied softly, "You're giving too much of yourself. Delilah, you can't pour from an empty cup, even if I know you love these kids." She was correct, but I was at a loss for how to stop. All I had left were these kids. I had lost my babies. The only thing that gave me a sense of purpose in life when my husband left was caring for other people's kids. Then came the day that made all the difference. I was tidying up my classroom for the summer on a Friday afternoon in May. I loathed summer break, but most teachers look forward to it. For 3 months, it was just me, my grief, and the pile of expenses I couldn't seem to pay off. No kids to worry about, no one to support, and no reason to live. My door was knocked on by Mrs. Anderson. "Could I talk to you for a minute, Delilah?" Her tone was different, cautious, the sort of tone one uses when delivering unpleasant news that one has been putting off. Before she stated anything, I was aware that budget cuts were imminent. My compensation was higher than that of the fresher instructors, since I had 28 years of seniority, and the district was eliminating some teaching positions. Although it was voluntary, they were offering me early retirement, a meager compensation that would hardly cover my expenses for 6 months. Being laid off with nothing at the end of the summer was the alternative. With tears in her eyes, Mrs. Anderson murmured, "Delilah, I'm so sorry. I would have you teach here until you are 90 years old. We've never had a better teacher than you." With 28 years of memories all around me, I sat in my classroom and attempted to figure out what this meant. No more teaching, no more kids to take care of, no more reason to wake up in the morning, and no reliable source of money. Even though I accepted the early retirement package, it was insufficient. I had enough money after paying the lawyers, the paperwork, and the taxes to last for 4 months or so. Then what? What was I expected to do at the age of 58? With a teaching degree and a heart full of compassion for children. At that point, Mrs. Betty, my neighbor, informed me about a position she had learned about via her church connections. An affluent family in Charlotte's upscale neighborhood was seeking live-in assistance with cooking, cleaning, and other housekeeping duties. In addition to being something other than education, the salary was respectable and higher than I could earn anywhere without a college degree. It's honest work, and the Lord knows you need something steady right now, she remarked, adding that it's not teaching. I applied, swallowing my pride. What was my option? I was quickly running out of options, and the bills wouldn't pay themselves. In Myers Park, a community where homes have names rather than just addresses. The interview took place at a mansion. It was the type of location I had only ever seen in magazines or when passing by on my way to a place where I truly belonged. The house, which I used loosely because it was more akin to a palace, had windows that gleamed like diamonds, white columns, wrap-around porches, and what appeared to be 2 acres of immaculately mowed lawn. The type of home that exuded modern might and old money. Smoothing down my nicest dress, the navy blue one I'd worn to parent-teacher conferences for the past 5 years, I rang the doorbell and waited. I recognized the lady of the house right away when a young woman answered the door. Her hair, cosmetics, clothes, and even the way she carried herself gave the impression that she had never given any thought to her role in the world. She looked me up and down with unblinking eyes and whispered, "Oh, you must be Delilah. My name is Valencia Mitchell. Enter, Mitchell, Valencia." Her name sounded pricey, too. She showed me a sitting room with windows overlooking a fairy tale garden, past furniture that probably cost more than I earned in a year, and through rooms that could have held my entire classroom. Like a queen presiding over her court, she commanded, "Sit," and sat down in a chair across from me. I have never had an interview like this before. Valencia didn't inquire about my background, references, or motivation for applying for the position. Rather, her queries sounded more like tests. What are your thoughts on working for a younger person? Do you feel at ease following detailed directions without questioning them? Have you realized that in a home such as this, discretion is vital? In an attempt to appear confident, I gave the best response I could. This employment was necessary for me. Valencia's piercing eyes gave me the impression that she knew how much I needed it. It's a live-in position. You'll stay in a tiny flat above the garage. General housekeeping, laundry, some meal preparation, and any other duties I give you are all part of your duties. In addition to lodging and board, the weekly salary is $1,500. $1,500 every week, more than I earned in a month as a teacher. It had the feel of winning the lotto. Valencia went on, her voice becoming more abrasive. There is one thing you need to understand. Quentin, my fiancé, travels a lot for work. This household operates on my rules, and only my rules when he is away. Does that make sense? I nodded, but there was something about the way she said it that made me shiver. Fantastic. When are you able to begin? Right away. I think I spoke too soon. Although it didn't reach her eyes, she grinned. Excellent. I'll arrange for someone to show you to your room. This weekend is your move-in date. In my 15-year-old Honda, I drove away from that mansion with an inexplicable sense of relief and dread. I was relieved to have solved my financial issues. Dread, because there was something about Valencia Mitchell that I couldn't quite place, but it felt deadly. However, I ignored the emotion. I was an adult lady who had worked as a teacher for about 30 years, dealing with demanding pupils and parents. How difficult could one pampered, wealthy girl be? Oh, honey, I would have driven that old Honda right back home and found another means to pay my expenses if I had known then what I know now. However, I was unaware. In the belief that I was beginning a new chapter in my life, I packed up my belongings, bid farewell to my small home, and moved into the servants' quarters of the Mitchell mansion. I had no idea that I was entering a nightmare that would try my every remaining strength, dignity, and faith. Furthermore, I was unaware that my son would soon be married to the lady who was going to ruin my life. Moving day arrived sooner than I had anticipated. I had very little to pack. My material belongings easily fit into my Honda after I lost Clarence and had to sell most of our furnishings to cover medical expenses. The baby bracelets from the hospital where Jeremiah and Jasmine were born, a few of clothing boxes, some pictures, my Bible, and the little jewelry box containing my wedding ring. It was a decent enough flat over the garage, 1 bedroom with a bathroom, a tiny kitchen, and a small living area. It was spotless, with neutral furnishings that appeared to have been taken from a catalogue. Really, it was more room than I needed. However, it had the feel of an impersonal, frigid hotel room that was never intended to be a home. I was carrying in my final box when Valencia greeted me at the door. She was completely covered in white clothing, white heels that most likely cost more than my vehicle payment, white pants, and a white silk blouse. If angels had ice in their veins and wore fancy clothes, she would have looked like one. "Delilah," she remarked, refusing to assist with the obviously hefty box, "I'll give you a tour of the house and go over your responsibilities." She showed me room after room for the next 2 hours, going into painful detail about how she wanted everything kept in order. A certain product had to be used to clean the kitchen counters, applied in circular motions, and then buffed to a high sheen. She bought a special mop from Italy for the hardwood floors, which could only be used with distilled water and a few drops of oil. Every day, the 7 bathrooms, including the ones that were never used, had to be cleaned. As we stood in the formal dining room, which could accommodate 20 people, Valencia said that I entertained often. Everything needs to be flawless all the time. I never know when I might have to invite friends or clients around. She gave me a tour of the laundry area while describing the various types of fabric and their maintenance needs. She was to either take her things to a particular dry cleaner downtown or have them hand-washed. She took sure to inform me that the Egyptian cotton sheets needed to be ironed with lavender water and changed twice a week. As we concluded our tour in the kitchen, she asked if we had any further questions. Her tone gave me the impression that she wasn't particularly interested in listening to my plethora of inquiries. I said, "I think I get it. Okay, I'll let you settle in. Tomorrow night, Quentin will return from a business trip, and on Saturday, I will be throwing a dinner party. The house must be spotless." I stood in that huge kitchen, wondering what I'd gotten myself into as she left, her heels clicking on the marble floor, but I forced myself to ignore my doubts and went to work. How difficult might cleaning a house be? I've done it before. In fact, the first several days were quiet. Valencia mostly spent her time meeting with wedding planners, going shopping, or visiting a spa. She left me lists of things to do and basically ignored me while she was at home. The task was challenging, the house was huge, and she had to clean everything to a level that would have impressed a 5-star hotel, but it was doable. Quentin then returned home. I heard a deep voice say, "Delilah, I'm home," as the front door opened as I was dusting the living room. When she shouted back, "Sweetheart," her voice was so warm and loving that it seemed as though she had changed altogether. Footsteps, a soft chat, and what sounded like a lengthy kiss were all heard. Although I made an effort to concentrate on my dusting, I couldn't help but observe how Valencia's entire attitude altered in the presence of her fiancé. Warm and kind, the Ice Princess hung on to everything he said and laughed at everything he said. Valencia shouted out to Delilah to come meet Quentin. In anticipation of meeting the guy who had decided to wed Valencia, I put down my dusting cloth and entered the entryway. I could not have been prepared for what I witnessed. He had a smile that filled his entire face, was tall, well-dressed, and had good eyes. My heart stopped, but it wasn't because he was a handsome, prosperous man, the kind of man any woman would be delighted to call her husband. His chuckle was rich and deep. just as I had imagined it would sound in adulthood. It was the way he cocked his head in thought, the little scar above his left eyebrow from when he was 3 years old and fell off his tricycle. Those eyes were familiar to me. That face was familiar to me. For 28 years I had dreamed about it every night, but it couldn't be. There was no way. Because I was sorely missing my son, my mind was deceiving me into seeing what I wanted to see. Valencia wrapped herself like a vine around his arm and whispered, "Delilah, this is my fiancé, Quentin. This is our new housekeeper, Quentin." When we looked at each other, I noticed a spark in his hand as he reached out to shake mine. A moment of bewilderment, as if he was attempting to recall something that was just out of his grasp. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Delilah," he said in a kind, yet aloof and businesslike tone. "Nice to meet you too, Mr. Rivers," he replied as I shook his hand, mine own quivering a little. "Rivers, Quentin." It didn't matter that Rivers, not Washington, was the name he was born with. Adopted children frequently adopted the names of their new family. Foster children had new histories, identities, and places to live. As Valencia talked about the dinner party she was organizing, I looked at his face, searching for more clues, more evidence that this was my tiny boy grown up. Yes, I was the one who shaped his nose. He stood with one hip cocked slightly. That's how Clarence used to stand. Oh, God. I remember kissing that exact birthmark when he was a baby. It was a tiny mark on his neck that resembled a crescent moon. Then I caught myself, though I was being absurd. I was seeing things that weren't there because of my loneliness and grief. Thousands of males who resembled Quentin Rivers were likely in existence. This was not necessarily my son, even if I longed for him to return to my life. Nevertheless, I couldn't get rid of the impression that I knew him as I observed him interacting with Valencia throughout the course of the following several days. He was always kind to everyone, even strangers, and he liked his coffee black. He also drummed his fingers when he was thinking. Additionally, there was another element that I was unable to fully identify. Valencia's entire personality changed when she believed he was not looking. I saw glimmers of something calculating and frigid beneath the affectionate fiancé facade. However, she was flawless when Quentin was present. She is sweet, attentive, and all a man could want for in a wife. She entered the room without her morning mask on while I was arranging the kitchen pantry. She wore a robe that probably cost more than I used to make in a month, had her hair pushed back excessively, and had no makeup on. She regarded me as though I were an item of furniture that had been misplaced. "Upstairs, the guest bathroom," she remarked without introducing herself. "On the mirror, you missed a place." I had spent the previous day cleaning that bathroom twice. Every surface and mirror was immaculate. I apologized. "I'll deal with it immediately. Make sure you do." With a voice just above a whisper, she moved closer to Delilah. "Things will be different around here when Quentin is gone. I employ you, not him. I'm your boss, not him. And don't think you can just run to him and scream about how I treat you. He has total faith in me and would never believe whatever I say to the contrary." It made my skin crawl as she said the help, as if I were not human and had been scraped off her shoe. I responded softly, "I get it, Miss Mitchell. I'm Mrs. Mitchell-to-be," she said, "and you'd better understand. Because you'll be back on the streets before you can pack your things if you don't, if you cause me any trouble. And who do you think will hire you given your age and lack of skills?" She then gave me a chilly, ruthless smile that avoided touching her eyes, and turned to leave me standing in the kitchen, my heart pounding and my hands quivering, and that was only the start. Valencia made my life more and more terrible every time Quentin left town throughout the course of the following few weeks. She would practically use a magnifying glass to examine my work, identifying errors where none existed. She would chastise me for not reading her mind after changing her directions every day. She would invite guests around and force me to serve them while teasingly mentioning the assistants, loud enough for me to hear. She would remark to her companions, "Delilah, bring us more champagne," and then laughing, "I used to be a teacher, can you believe that? Some people aren't cut out for serious job, I suppose." These immaculately polished women who had never worked a day in their life and had no concept what it was like to lose everything and had to start over at the age of 58 were the ones who would laugh along with her pals. She would insist that I re-clean rooms I had just finished because they didn't meet her standards. When I wasn't home, she would move things around in my flat and rummage through my personal stuff. She reminded me that everything on her property belonged to her, including my privacy. When I gently begged her not to do that, she would say, "There's the door if you don't like it." But I was unable to go. There was nowhere else for me to go. I was finally able to pay off my bills and have some financial breathing room because to the money I was earning. But no matter how brutally she treated me, I couldn't afford to quit. Seeing her with Quentin was the hardest part. She changed the instant his car pulled into the driveway. Kind, affectionate, and the ideal fiancé. He loved it when she greeted him with smiles and kisses, inquired about his day, and listened intently to everything he had to say. He was obviously smitten with the lady he believed her to be. "Delilah has been fantastic during your absence." She would put her arm around his waist and lie. Without her, I'm not sure how I'd manage, and I would nod, smile, and act as though nothing was wrong while standing there, still trembling from whatever verbal abuse she had inflicted on me hours before. For what other option did I have? About 2 months into my job, I heard Quentin and Valencia conversing in the living room one evening as I was tidying up after supper. Valencia mentioned how beautifully the wedding preparations were going. As we discussed, there were 300 guests. "It will be the most anticipated event of the year." I could hear the affection in Quentin's voice as he said, "I just want you to be happy." "You know I would do everything for you, sweetie," she answered. "You already have," and I heard a kiss. I would attempt to concentrate on filling the dishwasher, but they kept talking. "What you suggested about starting a family immediately has been on my mind. That's what I also want. Quentin, I want to give you lovely children. Sons that resemble you." My heart tightened. Sons that resemble you. She was discussing giving him the children I never got to see him have if this man was indeed my Jeremiah. "I adore you," Quentin remarked. "I sometimes find it hard to accept that you are real. I never imagined finding someone like you after everything I went through as a child, after all that you endured as a child." My hands on the counter froze. By that, "What did he mean?" Valencia said. "Tell me again about your childhood. I enjoy listening to your tales. Are you certain these aren't really cheerful tales? I'm curious about every aspect of you, including the challenging ones." A pause occurred. Then, a little quieter, Quentin's voice. "Before I was around 5 years old, I don't recall anything. According to the social worker, that was typical. Trauma might cause you to shut out information. I only recall relocating from home to home while in foster care. While some families fared well, others did not. I never found a real home or an adoptive parent, despite my persistent hopes. My legs became weak. In order to avoid falling, I had to hold onto the counter. I used to invent tales about my biological parents. I would think that they were searching for me and would eventually locate me and bring me home. You know, silly kid dreams. I heard something in Valencia's voice, but she insisted it wasn't silly. Something that sounded far from sympathetic. It sounded almost premeditated. What became to your biological parents? I'm not sure. According to the social worker, I was discovered when I was 2 at a shopping center. No parents in sight. He sighed while the cops searched for them. They simply didn't want me, I suppose. Did they not want you? If this were my son, my Jeremiah, he would have spent 30 years thinking his parents had abandoned him because they didn't want him. Before I totally lost it, I needed to leave that kitchen. After scrubbing as fast as I could, I fled to my apartment and sobbed until I was completely dry. Is he the one? Is this amazing, successful man really my small boy? I began to listen more intently, searching for other indications, like he used to line up his toy cars. He arranged everything in his workplace in neat little piles. He picked off the toppings and ate them separately from the crust, which is how he ate pizza. When he was happy, he would hum generally old Motown tunes. When the babies got cranky, Clarence would sing them Motown. Was there any chance Quentin would recall that? However, doubt would always sneak in when I believed I had proof. I was a distraught mother who fervently hoped her child had returned home. I was seeing signs everywhere, of course. Naturally, I was drawing connections that were not there. What was I to do, even if it was him, which didn't seem possible? Excuse me, but I believe I am your mother. Approach him. He was engaged, successful, and making plans for a lovely future. What right did I have to ruin his life by making untrue accusations? So I said nothing. I performed my duties, put up with Valencia's brutality when Quentin was away, and watched in the dark while a man who could have been my son made plans to wed a woman who was gradually turning out to be a monster. With the arrival of summer, the wedding preparations went into overdrive. Valencia was totally engrossed in the details, including the meal, seating arrangements, flowers, and music. She reserved the most prestigious location, employed Charlotte's priciest wedding planner, and ordered a dress that was more expensive than most people's cars. And she grew more and more awful to me throughout it all. She would trace her finger over a gleaming surface and say, "The silver needs to be polished again, and do it correctly this time." Because she said the clean clothes didn't smell right, she would throw whole loads of them on the floor and force me to wash them again. She would knock over vases, accuse me of being irresponsible, and then demand that I replace them with my own money. She would have her friends over, make me serve them in my ragged clothes, and then apologize to them for the poor service. She would laugh and say, "I swear." Good help is so hard to find these days. However, Quentin feels terrible for individuals like her since he has such a tender heart. She is liked by others, as if I was something pathetic and broken, rather than as somebody who had dedicated her life to her vocation, sacrificed everything for her students, and suffered more losses than Valencia could fathom. 3 weeks prior to the wedding, the worst incident occurred. Valencia insisted that I accompany her for her last dress fitting, so that I could assist with the bags and ensure everything was flawless. With its white silk and crystal chandeliers, gentle music, and mirrors all over, the bridal salon resembled something from a fairy tale. I must say, Valencia's dress was gorgeous. A train that stretched for days, a veil that appeared to be made of spiderwebs in the moonlight, and thousands of tiny pearls that were hand-sewn. She had a stunning appearance. She embodied the ideal bride that every young girl aspires to be. "Delilah, what are your thoughts?" As she spun before the three-way mirror, she asked. However, I was aware of the trap in her voice. I said gently, "Miss Valencia, you look beautiful." Her eyes were chilly, but she smiled. "Just lovely. All you can say is that this outfit is beautiful, but it costs more than you'll earn in 2 years. Both the salon manager and the seamstress shifted uneasily. Other patrons paused their conversations to gaze at me. I said, "You look gorgeous. Stunningly gorgeous. Better, though I guess someone like you wouldn't be able to spot true elegance. though you most likely shop at Walmart, don't you? This is Vera Wang, who imported silk and hand-sewn pearls from Japan. I was so embarrassed that my face burned, like I was some pitiful creature who had strayed in from the street. The other women in the salon were staring at me with a mix of hatred and sympathy. Valencia pressed, "Answer me. Delilah, where do you purchase your clothing?" I said softly, "Wherever I can afford to." The sound of her laughter was like glass shattering, any place she can afford. Ladies, did you hear that? She's honest, at least. I desired to vanish. My goal was to leave that salon and never return, but I had to have this job. I needed the cash. So, as strangers looked on and assessed me, I stood there and allowed her to degrade me. I made a choice at that point that would alter everything. I had had enough of silence. I had had enough of her treating me like I didn't exist. Regardless of whether Quentin was my son or not, he had a right to know the type of lady he would be marrying. And this is not what I deserved. I was waiting that evening when Quentin returned from his business trip. After hearing Quentin's car pull into the driveway, I waited in the kitchen. My heart felt like it may burst from my chest because it was beating so rapidly. I was finally going to tell Valencia the truth after months of his torture, after seeing her pretend to be the ideal fiancé while treating me like trash when he wasn't there. However, my bravery left me when he entered the room, when I saw his weary smile, and when Valencia hurried to embrace him with kisses and kind words. His entire face brightened. "Delilah," he cried, putting his briefcase down. "How are you? From Chicago. I gave you something." He presented me with a tiny bag that contained a lovely scarf made of soft blue silk with delicate silver threads. It was the sort of present you give to a loved one, someone you think about and notice while you're away. "Mr. Rivers, this is too much," I murmured, scarcely raising my voice above a whisper. He smiled warmly and said, "Nonsense. You look after everything here so well. Valencia never stops telling me how amazing you are." I looked across to Valencia, who was keeping hawk eyes on our exchange. Despite her charming grin, I could see the caution in it. She put her arms around Quentin's waist and remarked, "He's so considerate, isn't he, Delilah?" She was constantly considering other people. It's among the many reasons I adore him. My moment was gone in an instant. How was I able to reveal to this kind? Giving man that his ideal fiancé was a monster, how could I ruin his joy by telling him untrue stories? I then excused myself to my flat, thanked him for the scarf, and sobbed myself to sleep. The weeks before the wedding were a complete mess. With the exception of Quentin, of course, Valencia was in full bridezilla mode, yelling at vendors, altering plans every day, and generally making everyone around her unhappy. She remained the ideal, kind woman he had fell in love with. She called the florist and said, "The flowers are all wrong." I did not say white roses. I said cream roses. Do none of you know the difference between white and cream? Her voice turned honey-sweet as Quentin entered a few minutes later. "I was just finishing up the flowers for our special day, my love. Everything will turn out flawlessly." It was similar to witnessing a multi-personality. Only one individual was able to see Valencia's lovely side. She was a nightmare for me and everyone else, including caterers, vendors, wedding coordinators, and everyone else. "Delilah, tomorrow the guest bathroom needs to be immaculate. You'll have to find a new job on Monday if even one person remarks about a dirty mirror or an empty soap dispenser in front of 300 people. Even though I had previously cleaned the restrooms twice that day, I answered, "Yes, ma'am." Additionally, be sure to blend in during the reception. The guests shouldn't observe the assistants stumbling around. You will only serve from the kitchen. Keep me out of sight, as if I was something repugnant that should be concealed. However, I nodded and bit my tongue. I reminded myself to give it another day. Perhaps things will improve after the wedding tomorrow. Engaged. Valencia might not be the same as wedded Valencia. I knew in my heart that was a stupid idea. Once she had Quentin's ring on her finger and felt more confident in her role, she would likely worsen, if anything. The wedding day began with a gorgeous and bright dawn. The weather was ideal for what everyone was referring to as the year's biggest social event. I had been up since 4 in the morning, making sure that everything was just so. The guest restrooms are filled and spotless, the flowers are placed, and the bar is set up precisely as Valencia requested. The house was changed, crystal chandeliers glistening in the morning light, thousands of white roses and baby's breath and white silk hanging everywhere. A fairy tale backdrop for what should have been the happiest day of two people's lives. It appeared to be straight out of a magazine. A group of hair and makeup artists Valencia had recruited showed up at 8 a.m. to prepare her. Upstairs, I could hear them chatting and laughing while they performed their magic. I was downstairs in the meantime, making sure the photographer's gear was set up correctly and that the caterers had everything they needed. Quentin had been at his best friend's place for the night. There is a custom of not seeing the bride before to the ceremony. Just before the ceremony at 3 o'clock, he would be getting ready there and arriving with the wedding party. Valencia's bridesmaids began to arrive about midday. 8 stunning women in lavender silk dresses, all eager for their friend's special day and flawlessly done up. The house was filled with laughter and excitement as they took pictures and drank champagne. I heard 2 of them conversing in the corridor while I was arranging the present table. One person said, "Valencia looks absolutely stunning. When Quentin sees her, he will die. She's quite fortunate. Wealthy, attractive, and totally committed to her. She truly struck gold." Yes, I am aware. Did you see the prenuptial agreement, or, more accurately, its absence? She persuaded him that their love was so pure that they didn't require one. She chuckled. Astute girl. She'll be set for life if things don't work out. My blood froze. Quentin had been persuaded by Valencia not to sign a prenuptial agreement. She talked $1 million man out of safeguarding his assets. It wasn't love. It was deliberate manipulation. But with such knowledge, what could I do? Inform Quentin that his bride might be pursuing his money on his wedding day. He would believe I was spiteful or jealous. He would never trust me. So, knowing what kind of woman was going to be his wife, I remained silent and carried on with the setup. Guests began to arrive about 2 o'clock. Even at a wedding, 300 members of Charlotte's elite were spotted networking, air-kissing, carrying pricey presents, and wearing their best attire. From the kitchen window, I observed as opulent cars crowded into the circular driveway and overflowed into the street. Valencia's people were these social climbers, politicians, business executives, and old and new money all battled for invitations to what everyone was referring to as the wedding of the decade. They met in front of an arch adorned with white roses on the back lawn where white chairs were set up in neat rows. I couldn't help but think of the young boy who used to arrange his toy cars in neat rows among all the planning and enthusiasm. Was this really my Jeremiah, all grown up and ready to wed a wretched woman? Or did I just see what I wanted to see as a distraught mother? Quentin and his groomsmen arrived at 2:45. I could hear the crowd's excitement as soon as they saw the groom, even from the kitchen. He greeted guests with the kind grin I had been witnessing for months. Looking stunning in his black tuxedo, he has arrived. Upstairs, one of the bridesmaids shrieked, "Your prince has come, Valencia!" As the bridal party was ready to make their entry, I could hear activity and animated conversation. I observed the wedding planner setting up everyone's positions through the kitchen window. Beneath the rose arch stood the officiant, a pretentious preacher from the largest Baptist church in town. Then the music began, the bridesmaids. each of whom looked like a princess in her own right, first made their way down the aisle wearing lavender dresses. Then, with the solemn focus that only a kid could have, Valencia's 6-year-old niece, the flower girl, dropped rose petals. All of the guests stood up as the bridal march started. I should have avoided observing. I was expressly instructed by Valencia to remain hidden in the kitchen, but I was powerless to stop myself. She appeared at the back of the house, ready to go down the aisle to the guy she had deceived into believing she was ideal, and I caught a glimpse of her through the curtains. She was stunning, I had to admit. The sunshine glinted on that varrowing robe like liquid stars, like anything from a dream. Her veil drifted behind her. She embodied the ideal bride that every young girl aspires to be. However, I was aware of what lay beneath all that beauty. Behind that flawless grin, I was aware of the malice, manipulation, and planned coldness she concealed. I watched Quentin's expression as she walked down the aisle. As he watched his bride arrive, he could see the unadulterated happiness and love in his eyes. He was totally enamored. He was going to be completely destroyed by this woman, who had his entire heart. I could no longer watch, so I turned away from the window. This was incorrect. This was all wrong. What could I do, though? Now it was too late. As the ceremony got underway, I made an effort to concentrate on my duties in order to get ready for the reception, but through the open windows I could hear every word. The minister is discussing commitment and love. Quentin and Valencia exchanged their own self-written vows. Quentin said, "Valencia," his voice echoing over the grass, "I had given up on finding true love when you entered my life. You taught me the value of having a soulmate, best friend, or companion. Every day you inspire me to be a better man." Every word made my heart ache a bit more. This lovely, affectionate man was dedicating his life to a woman who would never value her possessions. Valencia's turn came next. "Valencia," she said in a clean and pleasant voice, "you are my heart, my future, my forever and everything. I swear to respect you, love you, and be by your side no matter what life throws at us." Such lovely words, such flawless lies. "You can give the bride a kiss." The audience cheered and applauded. As rose petals fell around them, I caught a glimpse of them kissing through the kitchen window. The picture is flawless, worthy of a magazine, breathtakingly beautiful, and devastating. It felt like there was an endless line at reception. 300 guests were taking pictures, congratulating the happy couple, and raving about how wonderful everything was. I took use of the time to finalize the reception setup, including inspecting the bar, ensuring the band had everything they required, and liaising with the caterers. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who had spent 40 years organizing weddings in Charlotte, said, "You're doing a wonderful job, honey." She was Valencia's wedding coordinator, a kind woman who had somehow maintained her professionalism in spite of Valencia's unreasonable expectations. I wish she understood my true feelings about this day. Guests walked from the wedding location to the reception space, which included the back terrace and gardens that had been converted into an outdoor ballroom as the cocktail hour got underway. A dance floor had been put up in the center of the lawn. Round tables were arranged with crystal and fine china, and string lights twinkled overhead. As directed, I remained in the kitchen to assist the caterers with setting up the service, passing out appetizers, specialty drinks, champagne toasts, and everything else Valencia had requested, all of which were done perfectly. One of the catering assistants said, sticking her head into the kitchen, "The bride wants to see you. She is located off the main hallway in the powder room." I felt sick to my stomach. What on earth would Valencia want with me at her own reception? I discovered her in the powder room, using the mirror to touch up her lipstick. She still looked flawless even after the ceremony. with all the hugs and congrats. That pricey garment had nary a wrinkle or a hair out of place. Without glancing at me, she said, "Close the door." With my heart racing, I followed her instructions. She turned to face me and said, "I wanted to talk to you before things get too busy. Delilah, this is my night, my ideal night, and I won't let you destroy it. Ma'am, I don't understand. Don't act foolish around me. I've noticed the way you gaze at Quentin, as if you somehow know him or had a claim on him." My mouth became parched. Had she seen? Was I really that clear? I can see everything that goes on in my home, including every look, every expression, and every thought that passes through your pitiful little face. I am telling you now that I will destroy you if you say or do anything that will annoy my husband or my visitors tonight. Never would I. What would you never do? Never lie about me. Never attempt to poison my hubby in my presence, because I believe you've been planning just that. Her voice trailed down to a whisper as she moved closer. To be clear, let me say this. I am loved by Quentin. He has total faith in me. He'll assume you're unstable or jealous if you go to him and tell him how cruel I've been to you. He will immediately terminate you and ensure that you never again work in this town. Rivers, Mrs. Rivers, you're right. Quentin Rivers, Mrs. The most significant individual in his life is his wife. You are nothing too. The help is you. It is easily forgotten and replaced. She walked over to the mirror and took another look at herself. This is what is going to occur. You will return to the kitchen. You're going to keep your mouth shut and perform your duties. We'll talk about your future job after tonight. On my wedding day, however, you will vanish like the obedient little servant you are. I stood there trembling with humiliation and rage as she hurried past me and out of the powder room. However, she had committed a single, significant mistake that would alter everything. I was pushed too far by her. I had tolerated her mistreatment for months, keeping quiet to save my job, and allowing her to treat me as though I were unimportant. However, this was not like the others. It was no longer just about me. This was about Quentin, the man who could be my son, who was going to live his entire life with an unhappy lady. My thoughts were racing when I returned to the kitchen. I observed Valencia working the room throughout the evening while assisting with dinner service and liaising with the caterers. I have to admit, she was stunning. The glowing bride, the ideal hostess, enchants each visitor with her beauty and wit. And she had Quentin totally enthralled. As she charmed his business associates and joked with his friends, I saw him admire her and saw the pride and love in his eyes. She fulfilled every wish he had ever had. However, I had seen the true her. I was aware of her potential. I saw something throughout dinner as everyone savored their expertly prepared entrees and raised a glass to the happy couple. Everything was being photographed, including the guests, the decor, and the contented couple. However, she was also photographing the employees, capturing the backstage activities that enabled such occasions. "Would you mind?" she said, bringing her camera over to me. "I enjoy photographing everyone who contributed to the day's specialness." Having these recollections afterward is usually appreciated by the couples. I nodded without thinking. She took a few photos of me working in the kitchen, helping to clear plates and arranging flowers. She stated it was only background pictures. Nothing that would be included in the wedding album's main album. At the time, I didn't give it much thought. I was thinking about more important stuff. The evening developed in a lovely way. Everything went smoothly with the dinner service. The speeches were heartfelt. The best buddy of Quentin talks about how Valencia made him happy. The maid of honor for Valencia is raving about their friendship. New family members are welcomed by parents on both sides. The father-daughter dance followed. Valencia danced with her dad, a well-to-do man who obviously loved his daughter. As the guests watched with tears in their eyes, they looked stunning together, swaying to a timeless love song. However, I saw something that broke my heart as I stared from the kitchen doorway. Quentin stood by himself at the edge of the dance floor, grinning sadly as he watched. There was an uneasy moment when the song stopped and the mother-son dance began. Traditionally, the mother-son dance would take place at this point. The band leader announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, but Mr. Rivers and his new mother-in-law will be dancing." In what should have been a moment with his own mother, the lady he believed had abandoned him 30 years prior, Valencia's mother walked up and gracefully took Quentin's hand for a dance. I had to go. I was no longer able to watch. In order to finally release the emotions I had been suppressing all day, I fled to the guest bathroom on the opposite side of the house. This kind, affectionate man believed he was an orphan. He believed that his parents had discarded him like trash. And here I was, unable to tell him the truth, watching him be married. However, it might have been best that way. Perhaps it was best that he didn't know. He had a lovely wife, a prosperous business, and a life. Why should I make everything more difficult by bringing up unpleasant memories of the past? In an attempt to gather myself, I sprayed my face with cold water. I had more job to do. Valencia would be observing my every action during the hours-long event. The celebration was in full swing when I came back to the kitchen. The bar was bustling, the dance floor was full, and everyone appeared to be having a great time. Gazing into one another's eyes as if they were the only two people in the world, Valencia and Quentin were dancing to their wedding song. Mrs. Patterson, the wedding coordinator, observed the couple with professional delight and declared them to be a beautiful couple. This will undoubtedly be included in my portfolio. Everything has gone flawlessly. If only she knew, it would be ideal. I heard heated voices coming from the main hallway around 10 o'clock, when the most of the older visitors had said their goodbyes and the celebration had become more laid back. At that time, I was cleaning up in the kitchen. What she said doesn't matter to me. Valencia was there, and she sounded irate. She had no right to be among the visitors. Quentin's voice, bewildered and worried, said, "Calm down, baby." "What's the matter? What took place?" "Valencia, your beloved housekeeper, spat. Mrs. Henderson recently told me that she witnessed her conversing with guests during cocktail hour, despite my explicit instructions for her to remain hidden in the kitchen. That was untrue. Valencia was having a great time, but I had spent the entire evening in the kitchen, save for a quick chat with a photographer. Quentin, I'm over her. I'm sick of her staring at me as though she's evaluating me. I'm fed up with her acting as though she owns this place. She must leave. You're disappointed, Valencia. The day has been long. Don't say I'm angry. I am aware of what I observed. Since the day we hired her, she has only caused us problems, and I want her to leave. I moved closer to the corridor so that I could hear everything without being seen. Quentin remarked softly, "She's a good employee. She maintains the house immaculate. She has consistently shown respect. To you. She treats you with respect because she has an odd obsession with you, yet she is someone else entirely when you are not present. She's rude, lethargic, and constantly acts as though she knows better than me. One more untruth. Valencia, however, was a skilled manipulator who was trying to make her new spouse more empathetic. Before the wedding, I didn't want to say anything. She's been ruining my life for months, and I didn't want to worry you. I can tell she despises me by the way she stares at me, the way she purposefully makes mistakes in order to aggravate me. Delilah doesn't sound like that, baby, since you are blind to it. She is cruel and spiteful in real life, but she puts up a front while you are around. Tonight, ask any of the caterers. They'll tell you how hard it was to deal with her. One more untruth. All evening, I had collaborated with the catering crew without any problems. Quentin, I simply can't have her in our home any longer. She will not begin our married life together, even in my own house. She makes me uneasy. A long pause ensued. I could see Quentin's face, caught between love for his new wife, who appeared to be truly upset, and loyalty to a co-worker who had always treated him well. Finally, he responded, "We'll make a change if that's really how you feel. You shouldn't be unhappy, in my opinion." I heard the triumph in Valencia's voice as she said, "Thank you. I knew you would comprehend. After the honeymoon, we can give her 2 weeks notice. Isn't that fair? 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to locate a new job and a new place to live after everything I had been through, including months of her manipulation and violence." My mind racing, I slipped back into the kitchen before they could catch me listening in. There was no way to locate anything good in 2 weeks. Who would hire me at my age and with my little experience outside of teaching? Since I couldn't afford even a small apartment, I would most likely wind up working at a minimum pay job. I was more devastated for Quentin than I was for my own future. He was clueless about the type of lady he had married. Valencia had expertly positioned herself as the innocent victim and persuaded him that I was the issue. The remainder of the reception went by quickly. I performed my duties mechanically, assisting vendors with equipment breakdown and cleaning up as people slowly left. Around midnight, Valencia and Quentin made their dramatic departure for their Italian honeymoon. They would be gone for 2 weeks, which was precisely how long I had left. I stood in the kitchen of the mansion that had been my home for months, knowing that my time there was coming to an end, while their automobile drove away, leaving behind tin cans and placards that read, "Just married." But I wasn't defeating myself easily. I made a choice that evening while I was by myself in my flat over the garage. I was determined to discover Quentin Rivers's true story. I owed it to both of us to find out for sure if he was indeed my son, and if this was my Jeremiah all grown up. I began by looking up any information I could about Quentin's past on the internet. He had a brief biography on his webpage. Mr. Rivers built his business empire from the ground up after overcoming a difficult childhood. No information about his family, early years, or how he got into foster care. I looked through public documents, newspaper archives, and anything else that could provide me with a clue. However, 10 or so years ago, Quentin Rivers seemed to have reached his full potential in the economic world. Nothing before that. It would have made sense if he had aged out of foster care and begun a new life with a new identity. I had complete control of the house for the next few days while Valencia and Quentin were on their honeymoon in Italy. I was not meant to be present. Although I had been providing time off while they were away, I was technically still employed. But I knew Valencia's tendencies, and I had keys. She had left me a list of thorough cleaning tasks to accomplish, as well as comprehensive directions for keeping the house in good condition while they were away. I therefore had a good purpose for being there, and I took advantage of the chance to find out as much as I could about Quentin Rivers. He had a first-floor home office with a view of the backyard. Valencia claimed that was Quentin's personal place and had always kept it shut when she was home. Now that they were both gone, though, I located the extra key in the kitchen and opened it. As I had anticipated, the office was tidy and well organized. 2 walls were lined with built-in bookcases that held legal texts, business books, and an unexpectedly large collection of novels. A huge desk with a top-of-the-line computer and neatly arranged paper stacks was situated in front of the window. However, it was the individual details that drew my eye. A number of photo albums were scattered among the business books on the bookshelves. With my heart racing, I cautiously opened one after taking it out. The opening pages featured Quentin in college, a young man I had been observing for months because he had the same warm smile and kind eyes. Images of him getting honors at graduation with buddies. I noticed there were no family photos. No parents grinning with pride at their son's achievements. I found what I was looking for further back in the album. Images from when he was in foster care as a teenager. Uncomfortable-looking child, wearing braces and wearing two large outfits, but unquestionably the same individual. Additionally, there were documents in the very back, well protected behind sheets of plastic. Birth certificates, court documents, and foster care records. I took out the birth certificate with trembling hands. It appeared to have been folded and unfolded numerous times over the years, since it was faded and worn. Jeremiah Clarence Washington is his name. Birth date, March 15th, 1992. Delilah Marie Washington, mother. Clarence Robert Washington, father. With my legs failing me, I collapsed into Quentin's desk chair and dropped the birth certificate. He was the one. He was the one, my darling, my son. 30 years ago, my tiny boy was taken from me. He had been leading a prosperous life under a false identity, believing that his parents had deserted him. Additionally, he was now married to a lady who would ruin his life. I spent hours sitting in that office with his birth certificate, grieving over all the years we had lost, the birthdays I had missed, the graduations I had missed, and the happy times I had not experienced. 30 years of wondering if he was still alive, safe and content. I knew now he was still alive. He succeeded. He was generous, compassionate, and all I had dreamed he would become. However, he was wed to Valencia. I had to inform him. I needed to figure out how to explain to him who I was and what had actually transpired all those years ago. However, how? How do you convince someone that all of their beliefs about their past are false? What is the best way to persuade them that the woman they recently married is a monster? The following week was devoted to planning. I copied every document I could find that demonstrated Quentin's true identity, including birth certificates and foster care papers. I tried to find the right words to describe everything in letter after letter, but nothing seemed sufficient. So I threw them all away. In a letter, how would you sum up 30 years of loss, love, and grief? In the end, I chose a different strategy. I would ask to talk with Quentin in private when they got back from their honeymoon. I would present the documents to him, be honest with him, and then let him make his own decisions. Though it wasn't ideal, it was my only option. I was tidying up the house in the kitchen the day before they were supposed to return when I heard a car pull into the driveway. They arrived early. Valencia was getting out of a taxi by himself when I peeked out the window. She and a few suitcases, no Quentin. She appeared comfortable and tanned, as if she had just returned from 2 weeks of pampering on the Italian coast. She entered the house with a sense of ownership, which I guess she now possessed. She said, "Come help with these bags, Delilah." Wondering where Quentin was, I proceeded to assist her. She read my face and said that he had to take a plane directly to Los Angeles for a business emergency. He will return tomorrow evening. Fantastic. A full day by herself with Valencia, who had just returned from her honeymoon and was likely feeling stronger than ever. "We need to have a serious talk about your future here. So I hope you made the most of your time while we were away," she remarked, casting a critical glance about the immaculate house. "In fact, Mrs. Rivers, I hoped we could hold off until Mr. Rivers got back. I need to talk to you both about something serious." The sound of her icy laugh made my skin crawl. "You don't need to talk to my spouse about anything, honey. I've determined that 2 weeks' notice is too liberal, and your job is now between you and me." My heart fell. "What are you saying? You're fired, after all." "With instant effect. Before tomorrow morning, I want you out of my house. I have nowhere to go, though. It's not my issue. Before you chose to make trouble at my wedding, you ought to have given that some thought. I didn't interfere with your wedding in any way. I urged you to stay in the kitchen, yet you were spotted chatting with guests. Mrs. Henderson filled me in on your brief exchange with the photographer, the woman who snapped a few photos of me at work. That was Valencia's proof of wrongdoing. She requested that I be photographed for her portfolio. 30 seconds passed. I'd rather not listen to your justifications. The truth is that on my wedding day, you disregarded my explicit instructions. That is grounds for termination right away. She had been preparing this the entire time, I realized as I gazed at her, this stunning woman in her pricey attire, just off her honeymoon from a fairy tale. All she had been waiting for was a reason. I muttered, "I'll pack tonight and leave in the morning." "Make sure you do. Don't even consider attempting to get in touch with Quentin, Delilah. I've already informed him of your actions during the wedding. You have greatly disappointed him. One more untruth. What could I do, though? I was out of time, outnumbered, and outgunned. I packed my few belongings and tried to think of what I should do next that evening. What use did the documents I possessed that proved Quentin's identification now serve? Valencia had ensured that I would never be near him enough to tell him the truth. I heard a car pull into the driveway while I was sitting on my bed with Quentin's birth certificate. I could see headlights approaching the home from my window. Early, Quentin arrived home. This was my opportunity, possibly my only one. With my heart racing, I snatched up the folder containing all the papers and hurried downstairs. At the main door, I could hear Valencia's kind and affectionate voice welcoming him. "You are early, darling." What was Los Angeles like, wearying out? "I'm so happy to be at home. You were missed." As they made their way to the living room, I heard them kissing and then having a quiet chat. While remaining disguised, I was able to hear their voices as I drew closer. "I have some bad news regarding Delilah. How about her? I was forced to release her. I apologize, sweetie. Although I am aware that you liked her, her actions at the wedding were very inappropriate." "What conduct?" "Nothing seemed amiss to me." "That's because she was impolite to the caterers and wandered around chatting with visitors when she should have been working, while you were focused on me as you should have been. Mrs. Henderson witnessed the entire event. Delilah doesn't sound like that. I understand that it's difficult to accept that she totally deceived you, but she was someone else when you weren't around, hostile, disobedient, and nearly unstable. I was done listening to lies. It was my time." Holding the folder to my chest, I entered the living room. My voice was louder than I felt when I said, "Mr. Rivers, I apologize for interrupting, but I must talk to you. It's critical." Valencia's face turned red with rage after turning white. "You dare! I advised you to avoid my husband." I looked straight at Quentin and said, "Please, give me 5 minutes, please. Something is important for you to know. Something from your history." "What about my history?" She's crazy," Valencia remarked hastily. "She was unstable. I told you, she has been fabricating tales in an attempt to stir up problems." I opened the folder and stated, "I'm not making this up. I've got evidence." With trembling hands, I produced the birth certificate and extended it to him. "Quentin Rivers is not your name. I'm Jeremiah Clarence Washington, and I'm more than simply your clerk." Quentin accepted the certificate while glancing at the faded paper. "Your mommy is me." There was an overwhelming quiet in that living room, with his countenance alternating between bewilderment, incredulity, and perhaps hope. Quentin gazed at the birth certificate in his hands, as if it were written in a different language. Valencia, however, seems on the verge of exploding. "This is crazy," she replied in a stern, icy tone. "Don't listen to her, Quentin. Clearly, she is experiencing a mental breakdown. She has been fabricating stories and acting strangely for weeks." "The birthmark," I replied abruptly, recalling that you have a birthmark on your neck that is crescent-shaped and located just below your left ear. Immediately, Quentin's hand moved to his neck, covering the very area I had indicated. His gaze expanded. He murmured, "How did you know that?" "Because every night when I put you and your sister to bed, I used to kiss that tiny mark." My lovely twins, Jeremiah. You were my babies. Valencia screamed. Stop. Put an end to feeding him these fantasies. She clearly did some research on you, Quinton, and somehow discovered personal information. Sister, Quinton said, utterly disregarding Valencia. Did I have a sister? You called her Jazzy, Jasmine. You two were inseparable, and she was born 3 minutes after you. When you slept, you used to hold hands. Something changed in Quinton's eyes. Perhaps a recollection attempting to come to the surface, or a recognition. I dream about a little girl sometimes, he added gently. I meant to protect her while we're playing, but she disappears and I can't find her. I have a horrible feeling that I've let someone crucial down when I wake up. I said, those aren't dreams, baby. Those are recollections. Now, Valencia was pacing, her poise breaking. This is absurd. You can't possibly be thinking of believing this bullshit. Quinton, she is a nobody who works as a housekeeper and is obviously fixated on you. However, Quinton had stopped paying attention to her. After examining the birth certificate, he gave me a fresh look. I was found alone at a mall, he claimed, referring to the cops. They said that I had been abandoned by my parents. My voice broke as I said, we never abandoned you. Both you and Jasmine were abducted. We spent years looking for you, and all we owned in the process. We never gave up searching and hoping. Valencia's voice was growing higher and more urgent, and she was lying. Quinton, consider this rationally. Why would she accept a position as your housekeeper if she was indeed your mother? How come she wouldn't tell you right away? I saw doubt returning to Quinton's eyes, and it was a legitimate question. I said that I wasn't sure. I prayed and hoped, but I was unable to be sure. And you looked so content and accomplished. I didn't want to ruin your life by bringing up unpleasant memories. Perhaps it would be better to let sleeping dogs lie, I reasoned. Until now, Valencia declared triumphantly, until you chose to stir up trouble immediately following his wedding. How practical. No, I answered firmly. You're going to ruin his life, so I made the decision to inform him now. He deserves to know that his family loves him. His family would never treat him the same way you do when you believe no one is looking. Quinton looked between us and asked, what's that supposed to mean? Valencia's expression turned pallid. Nothing. She's just jealous of what we have and is attempting to turn you against me. Bring up the bridal salon with him. Tell him how you found it amusing to make fun of me in front of strangers, just because you could. Tell him about all the times you've made me feel less than human. I don't know what she's discussing. Tell him how you threatened to ruin me if I ever told him the truth about who you really are the night before the wedding. I could see comprehension beginning to develop in Quinton's eyes as he turned to face Valencia. Valencia, is that right? He replied softly. Obviously not. She's inventing it. You know who I am, Quinton. I'm not mean, you know that, but I don't know you, do I? You seem to be a different person with everyone else. But I know the lady you are with me. Valencia's mask was coming off quickly. Something cold and cunning was taking the place of the charming, devoted wife. All right, she responded in an icy tone. Yes, I was strict about the assistants. Even though I had high expectations and wanted them to be fulfilled, this woman is still delusional and attempting to control you by making up a crazy story about being your long-lost mother. Then, Quinton said abruptly, prove it. Show that she's lying. A DNA test can be performed. Valencia felt the idea as if it were a bodily blow. She briefly lost all control, and I could see the utter panic in her eyes. I became aware of the reality at that point. Valencia may not have realized who I was right away, but she had eventually figured it out. She had been so keen to get rid of me before Quinton got back from his business trip because of this. She had been so anxious to fire me right away after the honeymoon because of this. She had been attempting to stop this very moment, and she had known. "There's no need for a DNA test," she remarked hastily. "It will not alter the fact that this woman has been deceiving us for months, and it is costly and time-consuming. Why didn't she say anything when we originally hired her if she truly believed you were her son?" "Because I was scared, and I wanted to be sure," I answered. Regaining my voice, "I'm afraid you wouldn't accept my story. I'm worried it will harm you. Regretfully, I was merely a distraught mother, getting what I desired." Valencia yelled, "You are a grieving mother seeing what you want to see." This is precisely the type of illusion that lonely, desperate women conjure up to give their life purpose. Quentin, however, no longer believed it. His mind was spinning, and I could see the parts fitting together like a puzzle. He spoke softly. "Now, the way you've been trying to get rid of her, you were always complaining about her, even before the wedding. From the start, you've been attempting to push her away. Therefore, she was unsuitable, because you were the object of her obsession. Or perhaps because you thought she could be telling the truth." Valencia's face turned hot and then white. "That's crazy. How could I have had such a silly suspicion?" Quentin murmured softly. "My little things," in a manner that I'm beginning to recall. The way she worked while humming. My foster mother claimed that I hummed the same songs when I was younger. How she arranged my office after cleaning it. Arranging things according to my preferences in neat small groups. Sometimes she looks at me as if she's witnessing a ghost. His eyes were full of unshed tears as he turned to face me. "Mom," he muttered. 30 years of anguish, hope, and love poured out in a sob that seemed to come straight from my soul when that one word broke something within of me. "Yes, sweetheart, it's me, indeed. It's me, truly." He dragged me into his arms after dropping the birth certificate. And I was holding my kid, my baby, my Jeremiah, for the first time in 30 years. Valencia looked in utter indignation as we stood there sobbing and clutching each other. With a tone full of irony, she remarked, "This is touching. However, nothing changes as a result. She is a liar who has been misleading us for months, regardless of whether this absurd tale is genuine or she is your biological mother. She is still a gold digger who clearly intended to take use of this information to control you." Quentin drew away from us and wiped his eyes. "A gold digger. The amount of money Mom has been giving away has exceeded her own income. Are you aware of what she did with her years of teaching pay? She used it for her students, children in need of food, clothing, and resources. Because she was unable to provide for her own children, she gave everything she has to other people's. How are you going to know that? Because she has been taking care of me without asking anything in return, and because I have been observing her and her character. As a mother ought to." Valencia became even less composed. "Okay, waste your money and get your DNA test. However, I anticipate a complete apology and the permanent removal of this woman from our lives if it turns out that I was correct." However, I could sense that she was afraid. She was afraid that the test would confirm what we both instinctively knew. Quentin stated confidently, "We'll take the test. Mom is staying here in the main house, not above the garage, though, for the time being, not at all. Valencia, it's not a request. I get to choose who stays in my house." Valencia Mitchell Rivers appeared really defeated for the first time since I'd met her. However, I could see her thinking and planning her next course of action. The days that followed felt like navigating a minefield. Valencia spent much of her time secluded in her room or shopping with her pals, and she seldom ever spoke to either of us. She played the part of the aggrieved wife with an Oscar-caliber performance, and when she did engage with us, she was coldly courteous. However, I sensed the tension rising. She had a plan. I had no doubt about it. In the meantime, Quentin and I were attempting to adjust to this new situation. We were trying, but it would take time to heal from 30 years of estrangement. He wanted to learn everything there was to know about his father, our pre-kidnapping existence, and the years we had spent looking for him and Jasmine. One evening, when we were sitting in his office looking at old photo albums I had pulled from storage, he said, "Tell me about Dad." I showed him a photo of Clarence in his classroom and remarked, "Your father was the most patient man who ever lived. He could provide 50 alternative explanations of the same math issue until all of the students understood, and he was incredibly fond of you children. Every night he would perform old Motown tunes for you, primarily Diana Ross, The Tempters, and Stevie Wonder." "I recognize those tunes," he added inquisitively. "That music has always appealed to me, but I've never understood why. I occasionally have this debilitating feeling when I hear a music, like if I'm missing something significant. I whispered that you were missing us as much as we were missing you. Give me more details about him and our shared existence." I took out additional pictures, remembering those good times with a heavy heart. "He was really pleased with you two, even though you were hardly speaking when you were taken. You already knew all of your colors and could count to 20. Similar to how you currently arrange your office, you used to arrange your small collection of toy cars in neat rows." Quentin grinned. "That's what I still do. I arrange everything according to patterns and groups. It was considered compulsive and obsessive conduct by my foster parents. Baby, it wasn't a disorder. You were simply who you were. Even as a toddler, you had an engineer's mentality, according to Clarence." "And what was Jasmine like?" My heart tightened. It was Jasmine who spoke. At the age of 2, her vocabulary was comparable to that of a 4-year-old. She would talk non-stop and inquire about everything she observed. "Mama, why is the sky blue? At night, where do the birds sleep? Can we get a close-up look at the moon?" She wanted to know everything. "Do you think—" He paused. "Do you still believe she is alive?" "She must be, in my opinion. I've hoped that you two were out there somewhere, secure and loved for 30 years. I can't abandon that hope just yet. What do you suppose her current location is?" "Quietly," he asked. "We'll find her, darling, but I'm not sure. We are going to take your sister home now that we have the means, contacts, and resources." Valencia then materialized in the doorway. "How touching," she replied in an acidic voice. "Are you going to start spending Quentin's money on pointless endeavors?" "Don't," Quentin warned Valencia. "Don't what? This woman is already preparing how to spend your riches, so don't bring it up. She's giving you fantasies of discovering an imaginary sibling, but don't disclose it." "Jasmine is real," I murmured softly. "She is just as real as you or me, just like Jeremiah. Show it. I want proof that this sister ever existed." I opened my folder and took out another document. With the exception of the name and the birth date, Jasmine's birth certificate is exactly the same as Quentin's. Valencia hardly gave it a look. Nowadays, anyone may falsify paperwork. These were most likely made to help you with your complex scam. Instantly, Quentin responded, "The hospital records. Twin births would be documented in the hospital." "Exactly," I answered, "as well as police reports at the time of your arrest. Court records from the hearings on custody. Reports from private investigators for years. Do you want evidence? I've had proof for 30 years. Valencia's face was flushed with irritation and rage. "All of this is really practical. Documents that are impossible to confirm. Unsubstantiated rumors. In fact, Quentin said they can be verified. I've already begun placing some phone calls. Some people have recollections of the case. Despite being retired, Detective Riley is still alive. Everything is recalled by her." I let out a gasp. "Riley, officer, is she still alive?" "Definitely. She is interested in meeting with us. She claimed that she never gave up on seeing this day. Valencia appeared on the verge of becoming ill. This is crazy. All of you are crazy. This is too much for me to listen to any longer." Quentin and I were left alone when she bounded out. I said, "She's afraid. She ought to be, because everything she has told me about you has been false if you are, in fact, my mother, as I think you are. What else has she been lying about if she has been lying about that?" 3 days later, the results of the DNA test were received. The lab tech personally called to deliver the news, and Quentin had paid for expedited processing. The likelihood of pregnancy is 99.97%. I was Quentin's mother, officially and scientifically. He took the call while we were seated in the kitchen, and we just stared at one another for a while after he hung up. "Well," he said at last, "that should resolve the matter. I suppose it does." My heart felt like it would explode with relief and happiness as we held each other once more. My baby was finally home after 30 years of wondering, yearning, and never losing hope. "Valencia, where are you?" Glancing around the deserted house, Quentin queried. "About an hour ago, she went shopping." "I need to think," she said. "Good. Because when she returns, we need to talk seriously." However, Valencia wasn't by herself when she came back that night. She had arrived with troops, her sister, her parents, and her college best friend. Like an invasion army, they swept inside the home, obviously ready for combat. "Valencia, dear Quentin, informed us of this regrettable circumstance. We are here to support you at this trying time." "What circumstance would that be?" Quentin asked thoughtfully. "The hallucination of this poor woman, of course. It is clear that elder abuse has occurred, someone attempting to extract money from you by taking advantage of a bewildered, lonely woman." Quietly, Quentin whispered, "The DNA test came back. She is my mom." There was silence in the room. A pin could have been dropped. Valencia stated swiftly that it is possible to falsify a DNA test. It is likely that she would bribe the lab worker. "Valencia, stop." Quentin spoke firmly. "Simply stop. I know the truth now. She is my mum. She's been telling the truth all along, and you've been lying to me about her character for months. I was keeping you safe. From what? From having a family. From being aware of my origins. From being manipulated. From being exploited by someone who is clearly after your money. She has never requested money from me. She has been earning minimum wage as a housekeeper when she had the opportunity to come out as herself and make a lasting difference in our lives. Don't you think she would have acted differently if she had been pursuing money, as though they were watching a tennis match? Valencia's family was glancing back and forth between them. It was obvious that things were not going as planned. Valencia's sister said, "Perhaps we should all just relax. Give this information some thought." Quentin remarked, "There's nothing to process. The woman who gave birth to me, who lost me 30 years ago, who never stopped looking for me. For months, she has been living with me, and my wife has been mistreating her because she was terrified of this same situation. That isn't accurate, is it? That's why you were so intent on firing her before I returned from Los Angeles, isn't it? Because you had a suspicion about her identity." Valencia's expression turned pale. "I have no idea what you're discussing. I believe you do. I believe you began piecing things together somewhere along the line. Perhaps it was your own paranoia, something she said or how I responded to her. However, you worked it out, and you attempted to get rid of her rather than notifying me, because I was defending our future and our marriage. Do you not see what this will do to us? She's going to want to be part of our lives now, part of our family. She will expect to be lavished with money, attention, and grandchildren. Our whole life is going to center around making up for her 30 years of grief. And there it was. Finally. The truth. Valencia didn't mind being misled or misled. She was angry that she had to give up Quentin's money, love, and attention to someone else. "You're right," Quentin muttered. "She will become a member of our family. From now on, she will be present at every significant event, including birthdays and holidays. Families do that, after all. What about my desires? What about our marriage's best interests? Honesty, trust, and compassion, things you've demonstrated you're incapable of, are what are best for our marriage." The mother of Valencia came forward. "Now see here, young fellow, you can't talk to my daughter that way. She is your spouse, a wife who's been mentally assaulting my mother for months, a wife who constantly misled me about her personality and actions, a wife who attempted to coerce me into dismissing the only individual who could honestly reveal my background. You're exaggerating." "Am I?" "Tell them, Mom. Inform them of Valencia's treatment of you while my absence." I glanced around the room at these antagonistic faces, folks who obviously saw me as a danger to their carefully thought-out future. I muttered, "She made me feel like nothing." As if I weren't human, she tried to persuade Quentin that I was unstable and dangerous, publicly humiliated me, and threatened to fire me if I didn't keep quiet about her actions. "You weren't dangerous," I said. "I was enamored with him," you claimed. "I was delusional," you said. "You attempted to convince him that I was a stalker who should be kept away from your family because it appeared that way. Don't you realize how suspicious all of this appeared to be?" "Your response to it seemed suspicious," Quentin replied. "If that were true, the average individual would have been interested, perhaps doubtful, but ultimately pleased for me. It makes sense now why you were afraid." Once more, Valencia was losing his cool. "This is absurd. I am your spouse. You choose to live your entire life with me. You can't disregard it for someone who has been deceiving you." She was telling the truth. She was attempting to shield me from just such a situation. She was willing to forego her own happiness in order to avoid complicating my life by giving me the truth, even though she knew it would do so. "How honorable," Valencia remarked mockingly. "It was noble, indeed. In contrast to all you've showed me about your character in the last few days, it was the most selfless thing anyone has ever done for me." The room became quiet once more. Valencia's family appeared uneasy, as if they were beginning to see that they had made a mistake, Valencia said in a little menacing voice. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying that we need to have a serious discussion about our marriage and whether it's possible for two individuals with such diverse views to coexist. Because of her, you desire a divorce after only 2 weeks of marriage. Honesty is what I want. I desire empathy. My ideal wife would not mistreat my mother when she believed I was not looking." "All right," Valencia murmured, removing her mask entirely at last. "Do you desire truthfulness?" "Let's be honest. Yes, I thought she might be your relative. Indeed, I made an effort to get rid of her before she could start causing trouble. And because you're too romantic to recognize the truth, I do believe she will destroy our marriage." "What's actually going on here? She is an elderly woman who has lost everything and is now desperately clinging to you. When she gets older, she will desire money, attention, housing, and health care. I'm not going to put up with her being a burden for the rest of your life." Even her own family was stunned by the harshness in her voice and the cavalier disregard for my humanity. Her mother had a horrified expression. "That's enough, Valencia," her father murmured softly, but suddenly Valencia was winning. Like poison, years of carefully concealed nastiness are spilling out. "No, I'm sick of acting like this is a lovely reunion tale. This has to do with security and money, and an elderly woman who is wise enough to recognize a good thing when she sees it. She's been gaining your trust and becoming necessary by playing the wrong game. Give up." Quentin's voice sounded cold. "Simply put, don't speak." "Why?" "Because the truth is too much for you. Because you want to think that everyone lives happily ever after and that the missing mother returns. Because I don't like what I see when you show me who you truly are." Valencia's loud chuckle reverberated across the room. "The woman you see is intelligent enough to recognize this trickery. Instead of wasting our future on some absurd illusion, you see someone who genuinely cares about safeguarding it. What can I see? You are the type of person that mistreats others when you believe you can get away with it. Someone who tells lies to achieve your goals. Someone who views my mother as rivalry rather than kinship. She is vying for your attention, money, and time. Prior to her arrival, everything was ideal. Now, her wants, feelings, and the trauma she has endured for the past 30 years will consume every aspect of our lives. How can I be fair to that? Once more, it was there, not worried about me. It was annoyance at having to share, not concern for Quentin's emotional well. What's unfair, you ask? I thought my parents had abandoned me for 30 years. I believed I was unloved and unwanted for 30 years. While my mother was out there mourning for me and never giving up, I was carrying that sorrow for 30 years. You now want to use me to pay for all of it, on our dime. Because married couples do just that. To care for the people they love, they pool their resources. I did not sign up to look after your mom. No, you joined to look after me. Taking care of me also entails embracing my family. The parents of Valencia became increasingly uneasy. They had obviously not reared this daughter, or at least they did not believe they had. "Maybe we ought to leave," Valencia's mother murmured. "Let's resolve this in private, you two." Valencia yelled, "There's nothing to work out. He has made up his mind. He's choose her instead of me. I'm picking love over manipulation, compassion over cruelty, and honesty over lies. Okay, but when she bleeds you dry and moves on to the next wealthy jerk, don't come to me in tears." That was the last straw. After being strained all week, Quentin's patience eventually gave out. Silently he said, "Get out." "What? Leave my house? Gather your belongings and leave. I can't be thrown out. I am your spouse, a wife who recently revealed her true nature to me, a wife who believes my mother is a burden and a scammer, a wife who has been deceiving me from our first day together. I never told you lies. You misrepresented yourself. You gave me the impression that you were generous, kind, and compassionate, yet you are not any of those qualities. You are ruthless, self-centered, and unable to prioritize the needs of others over your own. Valencia's family was already packing their belongings, obviously eager to get away from this catastrophe as soon as possible. Valencia exclaimed, her voice trembling with anger. "You'll regret this. You'll look back on this time and regret it when she proves to be all I said she was, when she destroys your life and takes everything you've worked for. My only regret is that I didn't realize your true self before we got married." For a long time, Valencia looked at him as if she was waiting for him to retract his actions, apologize, or plead with her to stay. She turned and marched out of the room as it became apparent that was not going to happen. After packing and moving out an hour later, she returned to her parents' house to make plans for her future. Both Quinta and I were emotionally spent as we stood in the unexpected silence of the house. I apologized. "I never intended to cause your marriage to suffer. Mom, you did nothing wrong. What was previously there was merely made clear by you. However, she was your spouse. You cherished her. She never existed, but I adored who I believed her to be. The real Valencia is the lady who, for months, made your life miserable because she loved to have authority over someone she considered inferior. Even though he was correct, I still felt bad. I was the reason this handsome, prosperous man had lost his wife. He read my face and responded, "We'll work this out, everything, after 30 years apart, the divorce, meeting Jasmine and establishing a genuine friendship. We'll work together, but it won't be simple, together." I wasn't going to be alone any longer after 30 years of solitude. However, I should have realized Valencia wouldn't surrender that simply. The divorce process got underway right away. Half of everything was wanted by Valencia: the home, the company, the investments, and the vehicles. In essence, she sought to be reimbursed for her damaged dignity by claiming emotional distress, alienation of affection, and a dozen other legal words. Quentin's attorney informed us she signed a prenuptial agreement. She's only entitled to certain personal property and 2 years of spousal support. Recalling the talk I'd overheard during the wedding, I said, "She told her friends there was no prenup." I insisted on having one a week prior to the wedding, even though there wasn't one at first. She objected, claiming I didn't trust her, but I refused to back down. He was a clever man who safeguarded himself despite being blinded by love. Valencia, however, wasn't finished stirring things up. Unusual events began to occur 2 months into the divorce proceedings. In the grocery store parking lot, my car's tires were cut. A brick was thrown through my apartment's window by someone. I was placed in a lovely downtown apartment by Quentin while we worked out a permanent residence. The phone calls followed. Hang-ups, heavy breathing. And even threats were whispered so softly that I wasn't sure I heard them. "You ought to return to your starting point." One night, a muffled voice muttered, "Nobody wants you here. My life was ruined by you. I'm going to ruin yours now." When I told Quentin, he hired security right away. However, whoever was bothering me knew to stay out of sight of the cameras. Enough intelligence to never leave traces. I said, "It's Valencia. It must be. We are unable to prove it." Additionally, according to her attorney, she has been living with her parents, going to treatment, and acting like the ideal betrayed wife. However, I recognized her. I sensed that she was observing me, following me, and plotting something more sinister than slashed tires and smashed windows. Over the following few weeks, the harassment intensified. Sugar in my gas tank, dead flowers on my doorstep, and distant photos of me with menacing comments written on the back are all things I'd be sure to find. Following the most recent incident, Quentin stated, "She's coming unhinged. This must end before someone is harmed." Despite their sympathy, the police were powerless in the absence of hard proof. Although they stepped up patrols surrounding Quentin's house and my apartment, it wasn't enough to give me a sense of security. The most severe event took place on a Thursday night in November. A car sped through the parking lot directly toward me as I was leaving the grocery store with my arms full of bags. Just in time, I leaped between 2 parked cars, narrowly avoiding the rushing car. The car didn't stop and was a dark sedan with tinted windows. Before anyone else could see what had transpired, it drove off before I could get a license plate number. When I contacted Quentin, who was trembling and hurt by my fall, he remarked, "That's it. You're returning to the house." What the attorneys say regarding appearances throughout the divorce doesn't matter to me. What matters more is your safety. However, I didn't feel secure despite the presence of a bodyguard and security cameras. The situation in Valencia was becoming worse, and I had a horrible feeling that someone was going to suffer major injuries. I was also assisting Detective Riley in the search for Jasmine during this period. Despite being retired and in her 70s, she remained incredibly sharp. We had been gathering frequently, reviewing previous case files, and searching for fresh leads. Reports of such kidnappings and professional operations came from other states. Despite our constant suspicions, we were never able to confirm that it was a part of a wider network. A system, most likely. Adoption on the black market, selling children to couples that were unable to adopt them legally after stealing them. The children would receive entirely new identities, birth papers, and lives. Jasmine might therefore be anywhere she might be. However, now that Quentin's case has been resolved, we may utilize that knowledge to focus our search. Social media, facial recognition software, and DNA databases. 30 years ago, there were no tools like the ones we have today. Since Jasmine was missing, I had never felt more hopeful about finding her. Detective Riley went on to say that these operations typically discarded children who proved to be too challenging to manage. When Quentin was discovered, he was placed in foster care. However, Jasmine might have been adopted sooner if she'd been abandoned later. It was simpler to place younger youngsters. Perhaps her life was better than Quentin's. It is feasible, or like him. She could have hopped around the system. We won't know until we locate her. Detective Riley agreed to call some old connections while we were going over files in the afternoon. Regular matches were being found in the new DNA databases, and it seemed likely that Jasmine had donated her own DNA in an attempt to find relatives. As we said our goodbyes, Detective Riley urged us to never give up. In this industry, I have witnessed miracles. The impossible can occasionally become possible. I was feeling more hopeful than I have in years as I drove home that night about finding Jasmine. We had a genuine prospect of getting her home, thanks to the resources Quentin could offer and the latest technological advancements. When I saw the automobile following me, I was thinking about how great it would be to have both of my kids back. For several blocks, it had trailed me, keeping the same distance and turning in the same directions. The car passed without stopping as I stopped into a center's parking lot to watch what would happen, but I was able to identify it from what I could see. It was a black car, the same one that had almost hit me in the parking lot of the grocery shop. Valencia was getting worse once more. The following few days went by without any problems, but every time I left the house, I felt as though someone was watching me, a shadow in the corner of my eye. My security detail was expanded by Quentin, but Valencia was astute. She was adept at evading detection. It ended sooner than I thought it would. On Tuesday night, I had to leave another appointment with Detective Riley, so I was downtown. She had provided me copies of a number of documents that I could show Quentin, as we had been reading through more old case files, witness accounts from the mall, the original police records from the day we were abducted, and even some old newspaper pieces pertaining to the case. She had advised keeping copies of everything. Quentin might want to see the official version of what actually transpired that day. I was considering how much suffering those documents held as I made my way to my car when I sensed footsteps behind me. Delilah. When I turned around, Valencia was there. Her normally flawless hair was tied back in an untidy ponytail, and she appeared thinner and had heavy circles under her eyes. She had been waiting for the ideal opportunity, following me. "What are you doing here, Valencia? I wanted to try to explain things to you by talking to you." She appeared composed, almost dejected. I briefly believed she could have come to apologize and try to patch things up. There were other folks in the well-lit parking lot. I felt reasonably secure. I was completely mistaken. She moved closer and said, "You destroyed my life. Everything was well until you arrived with your phony documents and your pitiful story. You know they weren't phony, Valencia, fake or real. It makes no difference. My marriage was ruined by you. Quentin turned against me because of you. He had to pick between the two of us, and he went with you. Honesty was his choice. He eschewed manipulation in favor of love. You were his choice." Her hysterical voice was growing louder. I looked around the parking lot in the hopes that someone would notice us, but the majority of people were rushing to get into their cars in the chilly evening. I never intended to cause you any harm. Valencia, you did, indeed. You sought retribution for my treatment of you. Because I don't worship the earth you walk on like everyone else. You intended to punish me. That isn't accurate, is it? You had the opportunity to identify yourself to Quentin right away. You had the opportunity to be truthful right away, but you chose to wait, didn't you? You waited to use my treatment of you as a weapon against me until you had dirt on me. Since I was unsure and didn't want to ruin his life if I was mistaken, I waited. You intended to ruin me, so you waited. You wanted to see me lose my good reputation, have Quentin turn against me, and have my idyllic existence fall apart. Her voice was frighteningly paranoid. She had created a complex fantasy in which I was the bad guy, and everything that had occurred was a part of a larger scheme to ruin her. Valencia, you require expert assistance. I need you to leave Quentin alone, to go back to whatever hole you crawled out of and simply vanish. That will not take place. He is my son. I had him first. You came along and turned him against me with your fake tears and sob tale after I had found him, loved him, and made him happy. She was pacing in front of my car, growing increasingly upset. She was obstructing my approach to the driver's door, so I began searching for ways out. What's the worst thing, you know? The way he loved me? He doesn't even truly love you. He simply feels bad about you losing your beloved children. He will ultimately get weary of caring for a pitiful elderly woman who has nothing to contribute but trauma and neediness. But guilt isn't love, Delilah. Her intention was to cause pain and sow doubt about my relationship with Quentin, and it was succeeding. I had been ignoring these anxieties, which kept me up at night. Seeing the effect of her remarks, she remarked, "He'll grow weary of you, and then wish he had never found you. When he was content with me, he will wish that things had remained the same. Hold on. He will begin to view you like I do. A weight, an error, a reminder of all the suffering and loss he has experienced. Quit! He will then despise you in the same manner that I do, and everyone who encounters you will despise you after they see who you truly are. Valencia, what am I? Who am I?" Her eyes were filled with grief and anger as she took a step closer. "You are nothing more than a pitiful elderly woman who is clinging to a man who is too kind to be honest with her. He feels compelled to bear the weight of you even though he doesn't want to. You are the worst type of parasite, one that thrives on sympathy and guilt rather than affection." I noticed the knife at that point. She was holding it low, almost carelessly, as if she were carrying a flower rather than a weapon, having taken it out of her purse as she was speaking. Carefully, I said, "Valencia, put down the knife." "Why?" "So you may continue to destroy lives. So you can continue to destroy those who stand in your way." "Valencia, I never destroyed anything." "That's what you did. A liar!" She raised the knife in a scream. "You ruined my life, my marriage, and my prospects." I flung myself sideways as she lunged forward, and the blade narrowly missed me. As she swung again, I was able to slide away despite my hips screaming in agony as I struck the ground hard. "Assist!" In the hopes that someone would hear me, I screamed, "Help me, someone!" However, as people wrapped up their evening shopping, the parking lot was starting to empty up. My shouts could not be heard above the din of traffic by the few shoppers who were still there. Valencia was suddenly standing over me, panting heavily, her flawless exterior utterly destroyed. This was Valencia, the real one who had been hidden behind artificial smiles and expensive clothing. A murderous woman. She panted, "You should have stayed away. You ought to have kept us to yourself." I closed my eyes as she raised the knife once more, remembering Quentin, Jasmine, and all the years we would never be able to reclaim. Then I heard a familiar voice. "Is that you, Mrs. Washington?" Valencia whirled in surprise, and when I opened my eyes, I noticed a young man walking toward us. He was tall, African-American, and most likely in his late 20s. He was dressed in scrubs as if he had just left a medical job. Tavian muttered, "It was one of my old students, Tavian Johnson. I had purchased new shoes for the young child who had holes in his old ones. The kid who, before I started carrying extra meals, had arrived at school hungry. The boy's mother had to work 2 jobs to make ends meet. Despite the fact that it had been 30 years, he recognized me right away, even though he was now an adult nurse at Charlotte Medical Center. 'Are you injured, Mrs. Washington?' Valencia was perplexed by this interruption and wasn't sure what to do, but she still possessed the knife. Witnesses had not been factored into her plan. I tried to stand up and said, 'Call the police. Call 911, please.' Even though Tavian was already taking out his phone, he continued to focus on Valencia and the weapon she was holding. 'Mom, please put that knife down,' he urged in the cool, collected tone he had developed while working in the emergency department. 'Let's simply take a moment to think things through.' Valencia responded, 'This doesn't concern you,' but her voice was already trembling. Her strategy had been derailed by the appearance of a witness. 'I am concerned about it,' Tavian stated strongly. 'My teacher was Mrs. Washington. Yes, it worries me a lot because she saved my life when I was 8 years old. There were more voices coming. There are 2 more scrubs. Most likely, Tavian's co-workers were wrapping up their shifts simultaneously. 'What's going on, Tavian?' A young woman came up and inquired. 'Call security,' he murmured, keeping Valencia in sight. Ending to 11. This woman is brandishing a knife at Mrs. Washington. Amara. I recognized the voice and gasped. It was another one of my old classmates, Amara Stevens, the young child who was too proud to ask for assistance but never had lunch money. The kid for whom I had brought additional sandwiches, acting as though I had prepared too much. She was still employed at the same hospital as Tavian, but she was now a doctor. Her training quickly came into play when she noticed me on the ground and Valencia brandishing the knife. Level 2 security, medical emergency, possible assault in process, and parking garage security. Valencia realized she was outnumbered and looked around frantically, but instead of giving up and dropping the knife and fleeing, she made one more desperate lunge at me. Tavian grabbed Valencia's wrist and twisted until she dropped the knife, moving more quickly than I had anticipated. While Amara knelt next to me to search for injuries, his colleague, a burly young man I didn't recognize, helped detain her. She cried, fighting against their hold, "Let me go." "You have no idea how she destroys everything and ruins my life. You must relax, ma'am," Tavian remarked. "The police will be there shortly." In a matter of minutes, the parking garage was crowded with flashing lights, police cars, an ambulance, and hospital security. Valencia, still yelling that I had ruined her life, was taken into custody and taken away in handcuffs. The paramedics examined me. I had scraped palms from striking the concrete and bruised ribs, but nothing major. After I gave my statement, the police promised to arrest me with stalking, attempted assault with a deadly weapon, and a dozen other offenses. I couldn't stop looking at Tavian and Amara, though, and wondering at how these kids I had aided so many years ago had grown up to save my life. As the cops were wrapping up, Tavian exclaimed, "Mrs. Washington, I can't believe it's really you. Over the years, you have been on my mind a lot. Have you? Are you serious? My life was altered by you, the lunches you packed, the shoes you got me, and the way you made me feel important. None of it ever left me. I was crying uncontrollably. All I did was what any educator would do." "No, Mum," Amara added as she joined the discussion. "What a mother would do, you did. And I want you to know that thanks to you, many of us youngsters who you supported made it. We occasionally discuss you, ponder your whereabouts, and hope all is well with you. Really? Actually, Bryson is currently employed as a teacher in the same district where you were a teacher. Nalani has launched her own eatery. As a social worker, Malik assists children in foster care. All of us recall what you did for us. Mrs. Washington, you were more than our teacher, Tavian continued. You are our angel of protection. At that point, Quentin showed there after receiving my desperate phone call. He got completely white after glancing at the ambulance and the police cars. Are you all right, Mom? What took place? Still trembling from the attack, I gave him a strong hug. Tavian and Amara saved me from Valencia's attempt to harm me. With a grateful expression on his face, Quentin turned to meet my former students. Thank you. I appreciate you keeping her safe. Tavian remarked there was no need for thanks. When we were children, we were all sheltered by Mrs. Washington. The least we could do was this. I told Quentin about our talk with Detective Riley and the fresh leads we had on Jasmine's whereabouts while we were driving home that evening. Mostly, though, I reflected on the wonder of Tavian and Amara showing there just when I needed them. When I brought it up, Quentin responded, "It's not a coincidence. You sowed the seeds of kindness throughout your entire career. Some of those seeds produced fruit tonight, just when you needed it." 3 weeks later, Valencia received a 2-year prison sentence and a mandate to receive intensive mental health care. The judge referred to her actions as a systematic campaign of harassment that escalated to attempted murder and warned that she would face further charges if she ever got in touch with Quentin or me again. The psychiatrist testified that she is ill. She has a complex dream in which all of her issues are caused by Mrs. Washington. She will continue to pose a risk to herself and other people if treatment is not received. But we had much more important things to think about by then. In order to find Jasmine, Detective Riley had been collaborating with law enforcement organizations nationwide, utilizing DNA databases and facial recognition software. Unexpectedly, the breakthrough was made. A woman in Austin, Texas, who was looking for her biological family after being adopted as a child. A family match with Quentin was identified when she submitted her DNA to one of those ancestry websites in the hopes of finding relatives. Although she was born Jasmine Washington, her current name was Jazz Martinez. She was a 30-year-old social worker with a focus on assisting foster children. After being discovered roaming alone in a Dallas shopping mall at the age of 3, with no recollection of how she got there, she was taken in by a loving Hispanic family. It seems that the abductors had left her behind when she grew too challenging to manage. She had never ceased requesting her mother and brother, Jeremiah. She had been crying all the time, refusing to eat and refusing to sleep unless someone held her hand, like they had most likely done with other kids who got into too much trouble. They finally dropped her off at a shopping center and vanished. On a Friday afternoon, Detective Riley called with the news. "I believe we located her," she remarked, her voice trembling with enthusiasm. According to DNA provided by a woman in Austin, Quentin's sister was born on the same day and in the same hospital. Jazz Martinez is the name she adopted. I broke down in tears and hung up the phone. We had finally located my daughter after 30 years of looking, 30 years of optimism and 30 years of disappointment. To validate what we all thought was true, Quentin took Detective Riley and a DNA kit on his flight to Austin the following day. After so many years of failure, I was too anxious to go and was afraid to have too high of expectations, so I stayed at home. The call was placed at 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday in December. With tears in his eyes, Quentin murmured, "Mom, my sister is in my line of sight. Jasmine is the object of my gaze." I hung up and started crying as if I hadn't shed a tear since the day they were taken. Both of my babies were on their way home. The following day, Jazz, who was 30 years older than when I'd last seen her, travelled to Charlotte. She had the same contagious smile and brilliant eyes that had brightened our home when she was a kid. She gave me a hug at the airport and said, "I remember you. I recall hearing you sing lullabies. I recall feeling secure." That first night, after 30 years apart, we spoke for hours on end. Jazz told us about the Martinez family, her adoptive parents, who supported her in her quest to find her biological parents and loved her without conditions. She insisted that I was unique and that my birth parents must have cherished me greatly in order to give me such a lovely name. In my heart, they never made an effort to replace you. They simply made it better. She talked to us about her experience working with foster children and how she was drawn to assisting youngsters who had gone through similar trauma as she had. She always had the impression that something was lacking, that I was unaware of a part of my tale. I felt as though I belonged somewhere else, recalling bits and pieces of a mother with a lovely voice and a brother who resembled me. Yes, you did belong somewhere else. You were a part of our group. Quentin also shared his memories with her, including dreams of a young child he was meant to watch over and emotions of unfulfilledness that money and success had never been able to satisfy. He claimed that I used to have dreams about losing someone significant and about not protecting them. I realize now that those were more than simply dreams. Jazz took both of our hands and stated, "We're together now. That's what counts." That year's Christmas was the most exquisite occasion of my life. After 30 years of wondering and hoping, I finally had my answer. My children were at home, and my family was complete. We had the remainder of our life to make up for the 3 decades we had lost. Jazz decided to relocate permanently to Charlotte over the course of the following few months. She wanted to stay near the family she had recently discovered, but she had also fallen in love with the city. The Martinezes comprehend. I was brought up to follow my heart, and you and Quentin are where my heart is. Quentin established a non-profit devoted to locating missing children and assisting families, split apart by kidnapping, by utilizing his contacts and connections. Jazz joined him as co-director after quitting her Austin job. They developed new search methods and support systems in collaboration with Detective Riley and other law enforcement experts. At the Foundation's launch event, Quentin stated that while we cannot regain our 30 years, we can ensure that other families do not lose theirs. The Foundation was successful right away. 12 families had been reunited in the first year. Parents who had never stopped looking for children abducted decades earlier. Teenagers who had aged out of foster care without knowing their true names, and infants who had been stolen. Every reunion brought back memories of that night in December when my own family reunited. In my case, I returned to my primary role of caring for children. Quentin established a charity that helped underprivileged children by giving them clothes, school supplies, and assistance. As the person delivering these presents, I had the opportunity to see the same potential and hope in child faces that I had long witnessed in my own classroom. Some of those kids were my old pupils who are now grown-ups with kids of their own. They contacted me to express their gratitude for the generosity I had provided them decades before, after learning about what had transpired with Valencia and the discovery of Quentin and Jasmine. When Amara brought her 5-year-old daughter to see me, she remarked, "You probably don't remember me, but you bought me a winter coat when I was in 3rd grade. You made sure I stayed warm during a difficult moment for my family." Yes, I did recall her. All of them came back to me. Amara went on. That coat wasn't just for staying warm. It was about having someone care about me and recognizing my coldness. I have attempted to teach my own daughter the value of individuals and the transformative power of simple deeds of kindness. These discussions repeatedly took place. The message that everyone deserves dignity, kindness, and hope is being carried forward by former students who went on to become teachers, doctors, social workers, and parents. Davian introduced me to his twin boys, telling them how I had aided him when he was their age. Not only did Mrs. Washington buy me shoes, but she also convinced me that I was valuable. When I was unable to perceive my own potential, she did. I was asked to talk to Bryson's class about tenacity and never giving up hope. Bryson was now a fourth-grade teacher at Roosevelt Elementary. I learned from you that having little money does not equate to having no value. I learned from you that despite what the outside world may say, every child has something unique within them. Former pupils started congregating at Nalani's eatery. On the wall, she had a photograph of me and a plaque that said, "To Mrs. Washington, who taught us that the most essential lesson is compassion." As we watched Jazz play with Amara's daughter one evening in his garden, Quentin commented, "You never really lost your children. You just had hundreds of them instead of 2. He was correct. Every child I've assisted, every life I've impacted, and every tiny deed of kindness I've performed have all returned to me in my hour of need. After hearing our story, the charity gained the support of lawmakers, business executives, and celebrities, and it expanded quickly. They reunited more than 100 families and established offices in 5 states in just 2 years. Jazz became a popular speaker who shared our story at fundraisers and conferences. She had a talent for engaging audiences and helping them see the terrible effects of family separation, as well as the transforming potential of reunion. I'm frequently asked if I'm upset about the years we lost, but I can't afford to be furious. Too many children are still missing, and too many families are still looking. While we have no control over the past, we do have power over the future. Despite being formally retired, Detective Riley joined the charity as an honorary consultant. She would dedicate hours to instructing junior cops in search tactics, imparting the knowledge she had accumulated from handling missing persons cases for decades. One afternoon, while we were working on updating the Foundation's database, she informed me, "I became a cop because of cases like yours. The opportunity to bring children home and reconnect families makes all the heartache worthwhile." Valencia spent 18 months in prison before being released. We never heard from her again after she relocated to a different state. She received the small compensation permitted by their prenuptial agreement when she and Quentin finalized their divorce while she was in prison. I made an effort not to think about her at all, but occasionally I wondered what had happened to her, whether she had received the support she required, or whether she was still overcome by the resentment that almost cost me my life. We were concentrating on creating our future, and she was a part of our past. 3 years after our reconnection, Quentin eventually got married again. Dr. Sarah Chen, the pediatrician he recently married, was raised in foster care. She was aware of the importance of family and the strength of second chances. When Quentin brought her to meet me for the first time, she stated, "I'm not trying to replace anyone. All I want to do is contribute to the existing love." She embraced me warmly and referred to me as Mom right away. As fate would have it, I became the grandma I had always imagined myself to be when she and Quentin had twin girls. During their wedding, I reflected on the path that had united us all. Surrounded by my kids and grandkids, as well as dozens of former pupils who had become family. It began with loss and heartache so severe I doubted I would make it through. Yet it ended with love multiplied in ways I could never have predicted. Stories that appear hopeless, where all is lost, and where the darkness seems too deep to ever find light again, can often be the best. These are the tales in which miracles occur. Those are the tales in which love triumphs. Now that I look back, I realize how God was involved in every event. I was reintroduced to Quentin's life through my work at the estate, the pupils that grew up to help me when I needed them most, like Amara and Tavian. It was the DNA technology that brought Jasmine home at last. In her own perverse way, Valencia even contributed to the reunion of our family. Her brutality made Quentin realize what was truly important and brought the truth to light. I sometimes question whether I can forgive her for the hurt she caused and what she did. Yes, I do, is the response. It's not because she deserves it, but rather because I don't want to carry the weight of hatred. There isn't any more space in my heart than love and thankfulness. Quentin and Jazz are getting ready for another reunion gathering as I write this story. A young woman in Florida who has been looking for her biological parents has now been paired with a family in Oregon whose daughter was abducted 15 years ago. Family reunions are often a sight to behold, seeing the instant of recognition when years of being apart dissolve in a single embrace. These reunions serve as a reminder that love is stronger than loss and that miracles still occur. This is my story. My name is Delilah Washington, a tale of love and grief, of violence and compassion, of a family split apart and then unexpectedly reunited. It's a narrative about the reality that every mother learns and every teacher knows. But more than that, the strongest force in the cosmos is love. It has the ability to endure separation, triumph over cruelty, and withstand the worst that people can do to one another. It can bring kids home. And if you're extremely fortunate, it can occasionally provide you with the conclusion you've been hoping for your entire life. The foundation that Jazz and Quentin established is still expanding. More than 300 families have now been reunited, and the number is still growing. Every success story provides families who are still looking hope that their missing piece may be out there, just waiting to be discovered. As for me, I still love kids and support families, just like I always have. My life is full of joy and purpose, whether I'm helping at the Foundation's family support groups, providing school supplies to underprivileged children, or just being a grandmother to my beloved granddaughters. I sometimes remember that day 30 years ago when my world collapsed at a shopping center when I'm rocking one of the babies to sleep. I reflect on the woman I was at the time, crushed, sad and certain that my life was ended. This was not the conclusion that woman could have predicted, that her missing children would return as prosperous, kind adults was beyond her wildest expectations. The hundreds of other kids who would refer to her as their guardian angel were beyond her wildest dreams. However, love has a way of creating happier endings than we could ever hope for. My babies came home because of love. My life was saved in a parking garage by love. Out of the ashes of sorrow, love created something lovely, and love still performs miracles every day, bringing families back together, mending hearts, and demonstrating that morning always arrives, no matter how gloomy the night grows. In addition to being my tale, it is the narrative of every parent who has ever lost a kid, every child who has ever questioned their origins, and every individual who has ever opted for kindness over cruelty. It is a tale of hope. It is a tale of faith. It is, above all, a love story. And in the end, love always triumphs, my friends. Now, if your son's wife had treated you in this manner, how would you have responded? Would you have given up a long time ago? Would you allow the marriage to continue and give them some space? Was I the bad mother-in-law or what? I would love to hear what you would have done in the comments section. I appreciate you hearing my tale. If my story resonated with you or you learned something from it, please remember to like this video and subscribe to this channel before you leave. It's a good idea to check out other videos on this channel as well. As we add videos every single day, remember to leave a comment with your ideas and comments about this story as well. See you in the following tale. Goodbye.